All right, we're about to dive into a wild medical mystery. It's a story that starts with something you might find on your dinner plate and ends with a terrifying seizure. We're talking about a hidden parasite, and it's causing a neurological disease that is as devastating as it is preventable. So let me just start with this question for you. What if the most common cause of adult-onset epilepsy in the world wasn't a head injury, wasn't genetic, but was actually an infection? An infection from a neglected tropical disease that is hiding in plain sight. And it all begins with this little guy. Yup, the pork tapeworm. Its scientific name is Taenia solium. And trust me, this is way more than just some simple bug in your gut. We are going to follow its unbelievable and frankly horrifying journey from a pig into our food and sometimes right into the human brain. Okay, so let's properly meet our antagonist. Taenia solium is a type of flatworm, which belongs to the phylum Platyhelminths. More specifically, it's in a class called cystodes, which is the scientific name for what you and I just call tapeworms. And this is like the rogues gallery of tapeworms. You've got Diphyllobothrium latum, which you can get from raw fish. You've got the really dangerous Echinococcus that comes from dogs and other canids. And then you've got the two we're really zeroing in on. Taenia saginata, the beef tapeworm, and our main character, Taenia solium, the pork tapeworm. And let me tell you, they are not the same. And this is the absolute key. You have to get this. While both the beef tapeworm and the pork tapeworm can grow into adults inside your intestines, it is only the pork tapeworm, Taenia solium, that can cause the severe brain disease we're talking about. The beef tapeworm, Taenia saginata, it doesn't do that. And that distinction is everything. So let's look at the anatomy of this thing, the business end of the adult worm. That's the scolex, which is basically its head. It uses those 4 suckers and that double crown of hooks to literally anchor itself into the wall of your intestine. And then behind it, you see that long chain of segments? Those are called proglottids, and each one is a self-contained egg-producing factory, just churning out thousands upon thousands of eggs that eventually break off and get spread into the world. Now, to really wrap your head around this parasite, you've got to understand that it can infect a person in 2 totally different ways. And these 2 paths lead to 2 drastically different diseases. One is, well, it's not great, but it's relatively mild. The other can absolutely be lethal. So, path number 1. This leads to a disease called taniasis. This is what happens when you eat undercooked pork that has these little larval cysts in it. The scientific name for them is cister cerci. Inside your intestine, that cyst hatches and it grows into one big adult tapeworm. At that point, the person has an intestinal infection and is now what we call the definitive host, basically a carrier who is constantly shedding tapeworm eggs into the environment. And that makes them a walking danger to everyone around them. Okay, now for path 2. This is called cysticercosis, and this is where things get truly terrifying. This happens when a human doesn't eat the cyst in the meat, but instead accidentally ingests the microscopic eggs. Those eggs hatch in the gut, releasing these larval forms called oncospheres. The oncospheres are incredible. They can burrow right through the intestinal wall, get into your bloodstream, and then they just travel all over your body. And they form those same cysts, the cysticerci, in your muscles, in your eyes, and worst of all, in your brain. In this scenario, the human is basically acting like the pig, what's called an intermediate host. It's a biological mistake, and it's a devastating one. And that brings us to the most severe consequence of path number 2. It's called Neurocysticercosis, or NCC for short. It's exactly what it sounds like, cysticercosis of the central nervous system. This is when the parasite sets up shop inside our most precious organ. And would you just look at this chart? It tells you everything you need to know about where this parasite wants to go. In a study of more than 2,000 cases, a staggering 82% of the cysts were found in the central nervous system. It has this clear and incredibly dangerous preference for the brain and the spinal cord. So what does that look like for the person who's infected? Well, this chart spells it out. The number 1 symptom affecting nearly 80% of patients is seizures and epilepsy. And that brings us right back to the question we started with. Of course, you also see severe headaches from the pressure inside the skull and other focal deficits, all depending on exactly where in the brain those cysts happen to land. And the cysts that form in the brain aren't even all the same. You have the more common cellulose type, which are these small, round cysts. But then you have the racemose cysts. And these are far more sinister. Look at them. They're large, they're irregular, they branch out like a cluster of grapes, and they can grow up to 20 centimeters. Imagine something that large growing inside your skull, putting pressure on everything. It's just terrifying. And the sheer scale of this problem, it's just mind-boggling. This is not some rare 1 in a million disease. In Latin America alone, it's estimated that somewhere between 11 and 29 million people are living with cysticercosis right now. This is a massive, silent public health crisis. So, with millions of people affected, how in the world do we fight back? Let's take a look at how this incredibly complicated disease is diagnosed, how it's treated, and, most importantly, how we can actually stop it. So diagnosing this thing is a real two-part challenge. Why? Because you're looking for 2 different stages of the parasite. To find the larval cysts that cause neurocysticercosis in the brain, you need sophisticated imaging like a CT scan or an MRI, maybe backed up by blood test serology. But to find the adult worm causing taniasis in a human carrier, you've got to do a stool analysis, or even better, a more sensitive lab test called a coproantigen ELISA. That's a test specifically designed to find tiny little proteins from the parasite in a stool sample. And that complexity is why you can't solve this problem by just focusing on people. You just can't. And this is where this brilliant idea called the One Health approach comes in. It's the simple recognition that the health of people is completely tied to the health of animals, in this case pigs, and the health of the shared environment that connects us all. You really have to attack this thing from all sides at once to break that life cycle. So step 1, you treat the human carriers with drugs like albendazole to stop them from shedding eggs. Step 2, you improve sanitation to keep those eggs from contaminating food and water. Step 3, you can actually vaccinate the pigs. There's a vaccine called TSOL-18/TSOL-19 that prevents them from getting infected in the first place. And finally, step 4, you educate communities about basic hygiene and the importance of cooking pork all the way through. You have to do it all. But here's the real tragedy of this whole story. As this quote says so perfectly, despite how important this is, the disease is underappreciated and the research is underfunded. We have these amazing advances, we have the drugs, we have the pig vaccine, we have the knowledge that hold the promise to prevent millions of cases of epilepsy, but we're just not doing it. And so that has to be the final question we're left with, right? We have effective treatments for people. We have a working vaccine for pigs. We know exactly how to stop this cycle. So why is a disease that causes this much suffering, especially in some of the most vulnerable communities in the world, why is it still being so tragically ignored?